Hello, my name is John Mella, and I'm delighted to present this paper, Gaming for Post-Work Recovery, the Role of Immersion, on behalf of myself and my co-authors, Joe Iacovides and Anna Cox. The overarching focus of this study is on how digital games can help to ameliorate the effects of work-related stress. Now, it's important to understand that work stress can have serious adverse consequences on workers' physical and mental well-being. In order to avoid these negative outcomes, workers must engage in activities after their working hours which allow them to restore the resources depleted during their working day, a process known as post-work recovery. Post-work activities are thought to support this process when they allow people to have what are termed recovery experiences. These are psychological detachment, the ability to mentally disengage from work; relaxation, a state of low activation and positive effect; mastery, which refers to non-work related opportunities for challenge and learning; and finally control, the ability to select between two or more actions when recovering. Existing research demonstrates that digital games can be an effective means of overcoming work stress. In many theoretical accounts in this area, it is thought that digital games are an ideal recovery activity because they have the capacity to engage and absorb their players, or in other words, to elicit immersion. In this study, we used the 5-factor definition of immersion, in which this player experience consists of 5 subcomponents. These are cognitive involvement, the effortful direction of attention towards a game; emotional involvement, which refers to effective reactions to the game, including tension and suspense; real-world association, the sensation that one is being mentally transported to the game world; challenge, which refers to the perceived difficulty of the game; and finally control, the ease with which the game controls are used. These dimensions of immersion have potential links to post-work recovery. For example, researchers have suggested that highly involving games might leave players with limited capacity for work-related thoughts, allowing for psychological detachment to take place. However, claims such as these are yet to receive empirical support, and this limits the ability of gamers to ensure that their post-work gaming episodes are conducive for recovery. To address this gap in the literature, we conducted a mixed method survey study in which 75 participants reflected on a recent post-work play episode. For the qualitative component of the study, participants answered open-ended questions focused on their player experiences during the gaming episode and described how these experiences influenced their recovery. For the quantitative component, participants completed standardized questionnaire measures assessing their immersion during the gaming episode, their recovery experiences, and their post-work energy levels. We conducted a thematic analysis on the open-ended survey data, from which 4 themes were generated. The first theme, optimizing immersion for recovery, reflected the finding that some participants employed deliberate strategies in order to curate immersive experiences which were tailored to their specific recovery needs. For example, some players deliberately played games that they found cognitively involving, i.e. required their effortful attention, as they knew this would leave them with limited capacity for work-related thoughts. As another example, some players specifically completed in-game tasks that allowed them to experience challenge, which in turn meant that mastery could occur. The second theme reflected instances where immersion served as a distraction during post-work recovery episodes. Mostly this was seen as a positive in terms of recovery, for example by allowing psychological detachment to take place. However, other participants actually avoided the distracting potential of immersion as they felt it prevented them from completing their other post-work responsibilities. The third theme, the mastery-relaxation dichotomy, captured an inherent conflict between these 2 recovery experiences during post-work gaming episodes. This is because participants found that high challenge experiences could support their need for mastery, whereas low challenge experiences were needed to facilitate relaxation. The fourth and final theme is an acknowledgement that for some participants, immersion was not an important factor in their post-work recovery episodes. Instead, these participants prioritized factors like the completion of games and the ease with which these games could be played. For these participants, there was no evidence that immersion played a role in helping them recover. Regarding the quantitative analyses, we conducted multiple regressions where the immersion dimensions were used to predict the recovery variables. Here, cognitive involvement, emotional involvement, and real-world association all exhibited relationships with the recovery variables. Most notably, cognitive involvement was the most consistent predictor of recovery in this study. Individuals who experienced greater effortful attention upon the game during their recovery episode were more psychologically detached and relaxed, had a stronger overall recovery experience, and had higher post-work energy levels. These quantitative and qualitative findings are in line with theoretical accounts of games and recovery, in the sense that they provide evidence that digital games' capacity to engage and absorb their players can be beneficial for recovery. Whilst the quantitative findings highlight that immersion dimensions like cognitive involvement are useful for recovery, the qualitative findings extend this further. For example, by demonstrating that participants not only experience the benefits of immersion in a passive manner, but instead actively optimize their levels of immersion to achieve recovery. It should also be noted that there exist complexities regarding the relationship between immersion and recovery. For example, different elements of recovery can conflict with each other in terms of the immersive experiences that they require, as is the case with mastery and relaxation, which we found require high and low challenge experiences respectively. Based on our findings, you might be wondering what you should do in order to successfully use games to recover from work. We offer some tentative recommendations here, albeit caveated by the need for more in-depth qualitative and quantitative evidence supporting these findings. Our first recommendation is that those looking to recover should play games with features that provide the flexibility required to optimize immersion. For example, players might play games with different difficulty modes, allowing them to turn down the level of challenge when they have a need for relaxation, and increase the level of challenge when they have a need for mastery. Secondly, we would recommend that people play games which they find cognitively involving, as this is likely to have the greatest impact on recovery, given the consistent relationships between cognitive involvement and the recovery variables in this study. And with that, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation and encourage you to read our full paper, which has been published as part of SIGCHI 2023.